Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's G.I. Joe, a real American hero, brought to us by Taxan. G.I. Joe, based off the toy line and cartoon series of the same name, has you playing as the G.I. Joes, taking on Cobra Commander. In the game, the Joes are going after several Cobra bases and blowing them up. Each mission is run by a different member of the G.I. Joe team that you're able to select from, and then you're able to add 2 other members to your team. And pretty much every member gets to run their own mission, as there's 5 selectable Joes, and you get General Hawk for the last level of the game, so you end up having 6 of the G.I. Joes in total to use. For the most part, I'll be playing as Rock and Roll. His upgraded weapon ends up being one of the most powerful, and being able to get that max power blast right into a boss does a lot of damage. The boss battles in this game are something I'm not a huge fan of. For the first mission, you have to take Duke with you. I'm going to take Rock and Roll and Snake Eyes, usually the team I stick with. Snake Eyes, while always fun to play using his sword, you also have a great jump using Snake Eyes. You have a punch that you can use, or you'll have to use when you run out of ammo. You'll have to press select though to switch over to your gun, in which case we do so and select Rock and Roll as well by pressing start and changing our Joe. You can see each member of the Joe team has a different amount of health that they have at their disposal at the bottom part of the screen. Thankfully, you can hold down the fire button in order to do rapid fire. You don't have to keep pressing it over and over again. Though be careful of doing that so you don't end up running out of ammo, which is a real possibility. You do get little bits of ammo from some enemy drops, and you can pick up some ammo, like right here, but it doesn't give you the max ammo back. For this boss encounter, we're going to start off by attacking as Rock and Roll, just blasting this ship as much as possible. Just keep dodging out of the way of the missile fire. I'm going to switch over to Duke here, and that's only because Duke is able to jump over the ship. Just keep on firing the same way, but jump over the ship as much as possible. Sometimes, though, it's just hard to dodge it, and I end up getting hit as I keep holding down that fire button to blast down this ship. The second part of most of the stages, the only level that's different is the final stage, is a part where you have to plant bombs on these check marks. So, you have to do a little bit of exploration and the like. Usually not too bad. There's some good paths that will be taken in order to kind of get through these levels relatively quickly. We drop ourselves down to the bottom, trying to be careful along this way. I stick with Duke for a little bit just because in case he gets hit, it's not as big a deal, as I rather have Rock and Roll ready for later parts of the level. Once we make it to another boss, though, I'm going to switch over to Rock and Roll. For this boss, the Hawk will end up flying on down at you. Watch out for it. And then the enemy will crush on down using a flying punch downwards that will break open the platforms below, which will potentially cause you to fall down. Just keep going back and forth, left and right, holding down the fire button and jumping at the boss when it's in the air, because as soon as you hit the boss, your fire goes away and you're able to fire again. So, if you're firing rapidly close to the boss, you'll be able to hit him many more times than if you're standing on the ground stationary. During this next segment, we're going to get a bunch of gun upgrades, thankfully, so we can level up. And thankfully, you do keep the gun upgrades between the levels. Here's our next boss, which is going to be a pain. A lot of the bosses like to kind of hug on you, moving right directly towards you while firing. Thankfully, he moves to the left here, and I'm able to duck on this top platform, delivering a lot of fire really quickly into him. If he is stuck on you, you want to kind of just move away just a little bit and keep turning around and firing just to get those shots in. Hopefully, whichever character you played as has those upgrades a little bit so you can take the boss down. With Range Viper taken down, the mission is complete, and we're moving on to the next level. For mission number 2, we're going to take Snake Eyes and Rock and Roll once again, as Blizzard is the one in command of the mission. The snowmobile enemies kind of come down, and when they get into the line of sight with you, then they move forward, so be cautious of those. You may have noticed I picked up a piece of armor, which gives you invulnerability for a period of time, and anytime you can get that, run through as many enemies as you can. You can see Rock and Roll, while it has a pretty hefty health bar, just a hit or two can completely bring your health down in this game. For this ship, you need to destroy all of the missiles on it. Staying on the far left or right sides and jumping up into the air firing is a good strategy for taking out most of the missiles. If you want to get up close and personal, you can use your default punch. It works pretty well considering how powerful Rock and Rolls is, and can end up doing some damage to these missiles in just a few punches, but you may run the risk of getting hit, of course. The area where we have to bomb is a little bit more complicated this time around. 3 bombs, but still, it's a bit more of a maze. There's a few vehicles in the game that you get to control, one of which is this helicopter that we're going to use here in order to fly on up and grab the first of the bomb spots. Thankfully, the vehicles have their own health bar, so when that runs out, your Joe is perfectly safe. It just falls out of the vehicle. Fly on around the conveyor belts. Work your way over to the right side here and drop on down this wall. Holding right, you'll be able to go inside the wall. Then at the bottom, you'll come out and be able to go right up to the next of the check marks. From there, be careful any enemy that could potentially take out your ship. Fly on up past that wall and all the way up to here, go underneath of this conveyor belt and over to the right corner where you'll find the check mark, and you can see right next to it is the exit. This boss is a huge pain. It's these 3 ships. We actually get to control these ships later on in the game, but they start off on the left side. They're going to work their way to the right and then back and forth. The only way to really dodge is by going back and forth and trying to jump over as many of them as possible. They do have fire out that they can do once in a while, but hopefully you'll be able to take them all out, or at least a couple of them out, before they start doing their projectile fire. There's not a whole lot of strategy other than just dodging back and forth as quick as you can. With all the bombs planted and the boss taken down, we're heading through the next area with these conveyor belts, heading towards the boss fight with Metalhead. These ships, just like those snowmobiles, when they get kind of on the same line of sight of you, they'll then come crashing towards you. As the fight begins, it starts running immediately with a running ball to the left. A big part of his attacks is these rocks that will fly out. Anytime that you have to deal with the rocks, you can potentially get between them. Not all the time, but some of the time. And other than that, he's just moving slowly along the screen, so just keep focusing your fire, kind of like you did in the last fight, and hopefully he'll go down in just a few moments. For the next mission, Snake Eyes is the captain. We're going to take Rock and Roll and Duke along with us on this mission. The beginning part of the mission is a big elevator segment. Pretty easy, nothing really troublesome to deal with, just a few enemies along the way. You can clearly see when they're coming up, so get near them and prepare to hold down that fire button for just a few moments. Just be careful not to waste any ammo if possible, and pick up any power-ups that they may potentially drop. This whole segment in general is a relatively lengthy one. You can get lucky sometimes and actually get a gun power-up to drop from some of the enemies, but it's relatively rare. You do have a boss encounter to deal with at the bottom here, so be ready to deal with that as soon as the elevator comes to a stop. We're going to be on the right side and firing up. That will allow us to hit this boss a ton real quick, and if you do a little bit of jumping, you can take out the boss before it's able to move again. Next up is the bomb segment here. There's 5 bombs that we need to place. I'm going to start off going up here and just grabbing this gun upgrade. I can grab it later on as well. I'm going to get inside this vehicle. As you can see, it's that boss that we were just dealing with a little bit ago. I hate driving this thing because the way it kind of hugs the wall and the way you have to get off of the wall is awkward and something that I always mess up a lot. So I consistently will go the wrong way for a second or two or not make jumps because of the machine. Either way, we're working our way through this little bit of a maze at the bottom part of the screen into the first check mark, then head back towards where we started the level. From there, you want to work your way over to the left side and drop on down here. To the left is another check mark. Now, backtrack and go up and to the left, watching out for the enemies. You can fire at them. The projectile of the ship is very weird, the way it kind of rotates around, so it's hard at points to actually hit things. Work your way back up here a little bit. Take out this enemy before you go up to the platforms, and then work your way around. If you want to try to save your health, you can. Sometimes it's just impossible not to get hit by at least an enemy or two during this. At the end of the area, drop on down, you'll see pretty much the same area that we just dealt with a second ago, where we get past the missile launcher and then go to the left and get the check mark. We're going to do that again here, except this time we get to go up the left wall when we reach the end. Now we have 2 more check marks left to go in this wonderful place. Go back up and to the left a little bit. You have to kind of do a little bit of a jump in order to get up. It's sometimes a little bit tricky, but you want to make your way up to this part where you'll find the next check mark. Unfortunately, this game has bad enemy respawn, so as soon as you go off screen with an enemy, they just end up coming back. That's why a lot of the times it's not worth taking them out unless they're going to get directly in your path. Here we can get an invulnerability for a little bit of time, and use that to run through this corridor and find the last of the check marks. Then, thankfully, we have enough invulnerability to quickly run back through those same enemies. Be very careful of the boomerang-like blade enemy here, and work your way along the sides and down to the exit. For this giant ship, be very careful. I'm going to use rock and roll and just keep firing straight at the boss from this platform. If I get hit in the air, I'll get knocked back to the platform behind me. If the enemy comes forward, I'm going to focus my fire upwards until I'm able to destroy it. Hopefully, if it does come forward, you're able to take it out at that same time. If the claw hand of it grabs you, it can be a bit annoying and it'll kind of throw you and takes a while. Doesn't do a ton of damage, but it's just more of a nuisance. For the next area, we're going to pick Snake Eyes to go through. The better jump will just help us, plus the sword is always fun to use a little bit. Be careful climbing the walls of some of the enemies, and we can pick up a couple of upgrades for Snake Eyes. Not that we're going to use him really for any boss, but still. Just keep working your way around these walls, taking out a few enemies that you may need to. Be careful of these bird enemies, that they don't end up knocking you back potentially into one of the pits. At the end here, we reach the boss encounter. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to rock and roll once again. You can't hurt the ship when the guy is out of it. You can only attack when the cockpit is fully in, so Basically, you just got to keep on firing when they're together, and when the ship fires out, watch out for it, and then as he's coming back, as soon as the cannon part reaches the Cobra logo on the top part is a good idea of when to get ready to jump. That way you know how to kind of time it and be able to get over it without getting hit by it as it retracts, since you can't see when it's about to come from that left wall. Next up, Captain Gridiron is leading the way, and Rock and Roll and Snake Eyes are going to end up joining him. I'm going to immediately switch over to Rock and Roll. I'm going to pick up a couple of gun upgrades to max out my gun here. I could have probably maxed it out earlier if I went out of my way just a little bit for a few power-ups, but thankfully there's plenty along the way of the game, and now is about the time when you really start needing the maximum fire. When you make it up here, go inside the left wall. Take out this enemy first if you want to. Get inside the jumping ship and then use that to jump up the next set of platforms. It's actually very useful to use, and we have a boss coming up that becomes very easy because of this ship. All you really want to do is kind of get underneath of it and just keep firing. You'll get hit maybe once or twice, but it'll definitely go down before your ship is destroyed. For the next area, we have 6 of the bombs to plant. We're going to start off with Snake Eyes going to the left side and climbing up this wall, and then climbing up the next wall. This will lead us to our first check marker. From there, work your way back down and over to the right here. Use the wall, jump on up. I'm going to switch now over to Rock and Roll and start blasting my way through these walls. Even the walls respawn in this game when you go off screen just a little bit. But either way, the top left corner is the location of another one of the check marks. Unfortunately, there may be an enemy that's respawned during that part and ends up hitting you. I'm going to end up jumping up here, just grabbing a power-up, and I'll use Snake Eyes just to run through this next little area. Drop on down and drop on down again. Then go to the left and work your way down this set of hills and find the third of the check marks. From that point on, work your way continual down and you'll reach the bottom where you'll see, hey, look, check mark number 4. Work your way up this hill, watching out for the flames. You can jump inside this wall if you like to pick up another power-up. Then you want to climb up these different platforms. It can be a little bit tricky to do. I consistently will bang my head a few times before I end up getting it. But either way, work your way up and over to the left here and find the 5th of the check marks. From there, work your way up the platforms. Just keep on working up. You'll come to another area similar to the one we were just at a moment ago. We're going to jump inside the wall this time to find the 6th and final check mark. And now we just got to get to the exit. And to get there, we're just going to go over here and climb up these platforms and wall. Once again, being careful because it is a little bit tricky for sure, and there is a few enemies along the way. But at the top is the exit. For the boss encounter, you have to work your way up these conveyor belts to the top where the boss is located. I'm going to switch over to Rock and Roll and stay on this far left platform and jump and fire at the boss. It can be really tricky to actually get on the platform itself and deal with him that way. Also, if the boss runs into you, he does a lot of damage. If you end up getting hit by just the rocks, they don't do as much damage. So, Unless you want to kind of just rush in at the end and you know you'll be able to defeat him, just stay on the left side and get hit by the rocks or try to dodge the rocks. This is really tricky to do. Once he goes down, we're moving on to the next area. Up here, go inside this wall, work your way down, and you'll find yourself another one of those helicopters. You can use this helicopter to thankfully just fly your way right through this segment. At the top, it's time to deal with another boss encounter. Switch on over to Rock and Roll or use Snake Eyes, whichever one you prefer at this point. I'm going to stick with Snake Eyes just for a little bit to start off this fight and take a little bit of damage for me. That electric type shock thing that goes back and forth left and right, you have to be on the lookout for the whole time during this battle. You can tell when it's about to happen, but still, if that hits you, it is devastating. Focus your fire, of course, on the boss as much as possible with your eyes kind of focused on the walls just to make sure you don't get hit by that laser, and keep blasting him until he ends up dropping. Unfortunately, there isn't a ton of other strategy other than having the dodge and keep firing. For the next level, it is going to be Rock and Roll, Snake Eyes, and Duke going here, as Rock and Roll is the leader. With the max gun, it does quite a bit of damage to most enemies during this segment as we run through. It is a little annoying, just because of walking up the hills. You gotta jump up them. Definitely take out the giant airship before continuing on in the level, because it's just going to chase you during this segment. So to make the level a lot easier, as soon as you see that ship, immediately take out the airship. Over here to the right is our first boss encounter for the level. Keep on firing and jumping through the boss's fire. You can kind of see when it's coming out. During the fight, he will open up and fire enemies out, and you can kind of blast them as long as you're concentrating the majority of your fire relatively low. As the fight goes on, the ship will move a little bit, and just keep on blasting and dodging as much as you can with your jump. Once it's done, we're moving on to the next segment. This time, it's 7 bombs. Oh joy. And don't worry, we still have one more bomb segment to go. We're going to start off by working our way over to the right, going through the walls a little bit, and finding the first of the check marks. From there, go over here, jump through the wall, and work your way down. Here you will find yourself another check mark, as well as one of those ships that we have probably at this point gotten used to, but still not that fun to drive. We're going to use this to help us, though, navigate this level a little bit. Work your way all along these ceilings, climb up here to the very top, then work your way once again through the walls and find ourselves the third of the check marks. From that point, drop on down, go through the wall, watching out for the enemies located here. Go through the next wall at the bottom. You can take out this enemy, thankfully, before working your way around. And now you're going to work your way downwards a bunch. And you can see the next check mark on the left side. Go up now and pick that one up, or put that bomb on there, whatever. Either way, from there, we're going to drop on down a bit and find ourselves the next check mark. Thankfully, not far at all from the previous one. From here, work your way over to the right, take out this enemy before going through the corridor. You may want to take out the next one as well before going through the next wall. While it's annoying, at least the fire does work a bit. I highly recommend taking out both turrets here before attempting to go over here. Keep working your way, and eventually you'll come to the 6th of the check marks. From that point, work your way back around. Unfortunately, yep, the enemies will respawn, and it's just really tricky not to get hit at least once. Once through that one wall, we're going to climb up here now. Work your way around. Going through here and down and around, watching out for the missile launchers. You can take them out, thankfully, from afar with your fire. I recommend doing so. And grab the final check mark. Now we just got to get to the exit, which thankfully isn't going to be too far from where we are. Work your way back over and around. And right there. Now this boss is a huge pain, mostly because of the level. The floor is completely destructible by your firepower. So you kind of have to work your way through, jumping up, making yourself little ledges, which can be difficult with the jumping in this game to begin with. And when you reach the top, it's time to battle a boss. I'm going to get my way over to the right side, making myself a ledge. You actually want to get it higher than I make it. Unfortunately, I made the mistake making it too low. You actually want to get it a little bit higher, and that way you can just blast the boss directly without having to move. But either way, you want to stay on this far right wall, jumping up and firing as much at the boss as you can. It doesn't take a lot of concentrated max fire to take him down, so hopefully you have a decent amount of health going into this battle, and you should be able to take the boss down. The next area is thankfully pretty straightforward. I'm going to stick with rock and roll using my max firepower to just blast my way through the area. A few enemies and the like for sure, but thankfully that firepower should be enough to take out most enemies from afar. I will jump up here just for the fun of it and get Snake Eyes a bit of an upgrade. Drop on down, and once again continuing my way through the corridors. Here you want to blast a couple enemies on them before continuing on. Watch out for the boomerang enemies on the platforms, but thankfully you should easily be able to take them out before having to jump to those platforms. There's more power-ups if you want them. Plenty of them throughout these areas. Right here, destroy the last enemy and then jump on up to finish the area and get to the battle against Destro. For this fight, we're going to immediately start off by firing upwards at the ship. He'll keep moving back and forth a little bit, and we can keep blasting quite a bit. And then he'll drop down, firing out a giant spread shot of fire that you have to kind of dodge in between some of the bullets. Once the ship is destroyed, the second part of the fight begins, which is a lot more tricky. The whole floor is moving on its own, and you have to jump over his attack while also jumping between the platforms. What you want to do is only jump when he ends up shooting out the blade. Sometimes you may have to jump beforehand, but if you see the blade coming, get ready and then jump. You usually have enough time between the platforms to jump over one of those things as you go, and this way you get a nice steady rhythm of the blades going underneath your jumps as you're already making those jumps across the platforms. Here we go with the final mission of the game, the first of the areas. Really, it's just this area and then the boss encounter against Cobra Commander. We have to plant 8 bombs. We get General Hawk, though, for this mission, as well as Snake Eyes and Rock and Roll, of course, I'm going to take as well. We're going to start off by working our way around down here and taking out a few enemies before getting to the first check mark. General Hawk, as you can see, has a jetpack that's very, very useful and very fun to fly around. His default gun is also really powerful for taking out a lot of normal enemies throughout the areas, so you don't have to worry too much about using him since he should be able to take out at least some of the enemies. You just gotta be careful that a lot of damage can be done to your guys pretty quickly throughout these areas. After hitting the second of the check marks, work our way down, and we're gonna blast through these walls. Work our way over to the left side here and drop on down a few floors before going all the way to the left where you'll find the third check mark. From the third check mark, drop on down all the way to the bottom level and work your way over to the right side. Thankfully, you can kind of float over some enemies in the areas that you don't have to worry about. Up here is the fourth of the check marks. From checkmark 4, work your way over to the right side, blasting open the wall, float up a little bit, and fly through this corridor. You'll see the next checkmark below. Just work your way now over to the left and up, and plant that bomb. From there, work your way back up to this main kind of center corridor, work your way up to the top. I'm going to grab a couple of power-ups for General Hawk just for the fun of it. But just below that, in this little opening, there is another one of the check marks. From there, work your way around these corridors. You'll come to this broken floor, or cracked floor, drop on down through it, and then blow open the wall to the right of it in order to find the seventh of the check marks. Only one more left to go, and then we can go to the final boss encounter. We drop on down a little bit, and now we're going to work our way over to the left side. Then down one floor, going over to the right, destroying the wall, and destroying an enemy or two along this way as we work our way down. Here, work your way through the wall by destroying both sides of it. Now drop on down, work your way over to the left, just a little bit more, destroying another wall and a couple of enemies that may be in your way before finally getting to that last check mark. Now we just gotta get ourselves to the exit. It is a little bit of a path that we'll need to take in order to get there, but thankfully it's not too bad. Blast your way backwards a little bit. Thankfully, General Hawk's flying ability allows us really to navigate quite well throughout this whole place. Jump up here, blast open the walls, destroying the enemy, and then fly up the corridor a little bit, go over to the right side, fly on up, going through the wall here. Unfortunately, I run out of ammo, which is something that just happens when you're playing this game sometimes, firing way too much out. And thankfully, though, I'm near the end, so it's not that big a deal. Now I'm going to get up here, fly up this corridor to the very top, go over to the right side here, and now over to the left, where the exit's located. Thankfully, we get all our ammo back between the levels, so it's not a big deal that I ran out there at the very end. For this fight, we have to jump between these platforms. There's electricity between them that will shock us, as well as we have to dodge both grenades and lasers that will actually transform us for a period of time, so you want to make sure you dodge them the most. What ends up hurting me, usually, in this fight is the electricity. It's really hard to focus on the bosses and not get shocked because it's very easy to walk over the electricity just a little bit as you're moving back and forth and jumping between these platforms. Just keep your eyes on those projectiles jumping when necessary and keep laying in the firepower until the boss drops, and you can sit back and enjoy the ending to G.I. Joe on the NES. So there you have it, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero for the NES, the first of the 2 G.I. Joe games on the system, the Atlantis Factor being the other one. That game is one that I actually did have as a child, but unfortunately never had this game when I was young. It's pretty enjoyable other than planting the bombs, especially the later levels. It's a bit annoying, but thankfully the levels aren't that bad as far as maze-like areas go, so with a little bit of patience you can probably figure them out. The ending to this game is one of the longest sequences just because of the boss roll call that they end up doing with each of the enemies and also showing off the credits along the way, so you get both at the same time. At the end of the credits, you get your password. You can do a second quest if you would like to, which pretty much limits you to 2 Joes instead of 3, which makes the game more challenging. With that, though, guys, it's going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.